1967. A U.S. Navy warrant officer walks into the Soviet embassy in Washington and offers to sell the keys to America's entire naval code system. What followed became one of the most damaging espionage operations in U.S. Navy history, run by one man and his own family, for 18 years. His name was John Walker, a Navy chief warrant officer with access to the country's most sensitive cryptographic key cards. He had spent his entire career climbing the ranks as a radio man, trusted with more and more sensitive material with every promotion. Those key cards were what let the U.S. Navy send unbreakable coded messages across its entire global fleet. Walker was deep in debt, running a failing business on the side, and saw an opportunity most people would never even consider. This was the height of the Cold War, when both superpowers built their entire strategy around knowing exactly where the other side's submarines and warships were at all times. Whoever controlled the codes controlled the war before it even started, and Walker was about to hand that advantage away. So in 1967, he simply walked into the Soviet embassy and offered to sell what he had. The KGB could hardly believe their luck. This wasn't a low-level clerk. This was access to the crown jewels of naval communications. Moscow was cautious at first. They tested the material he handed over for weeks before fully trusting it wasn't a trap. It was real, and it was enormous. Internally, the KGB treated Walker as one of their most valuable assets anywhere in the world. Every month, Walker photographed key cards and classified documents from his workplace. He left the film at secret dead drops around Washington, hidden in soda cans and taped beneath highway bridges. In exchange, the KGB paid him tens of thousands of dollars a year, year after year. The tradecraft was simple but effective. A chalk mark on a mailbox meant a drop was ready, a soda can by the roadside marked exactly where. For years, Walker barely ever met his Soviet handlers face to face. The entire operation ran on drops, signals, and silence. He eventually retired from active duty entirely and simply kept running the network from the outside, recruiting others to keep the material flowing. After retiring in 1976, he opened a private detective agency and, by all accounts, played the part with theatrical flair, complete with a hidden knife and disguises. But one man alone couldn't keep this going forever. So Walker built a network. In 1973, he recruited his best friend, a Navy communications specialist named Jerry Whitworth. Walker didn't frame it as treason. He framed it as easy money, low risk, between friends who trusted each other completely. Later, he brought in his own brother, a retired Navy officer working for a defense contractor. Eventually, he even recruited his own son, an enlisted sailor serving aboard the USS Nimitz. Michael Walker smuggled classified messages and documents off the carrier, stuffed into duffel bags, whenever he came home on leave. A father running an espionage operation with his own child for the Soviet Union. It's the question that still puzzles people decades later. Not just why he did it, but why he was willing to pull his own son into it. By most accounts, it came down to money and a strange, cold sense that keeping it in the family was somehow safer than bringing in an outsider. For more than 17 years, this network handed over the keys to over 1 million classified U.S. Navy messages. Naval intelligence officers later said that if the Cold War had turned hot, the Soviets could have tracked and targeted the entire U.S. submarine fleet in real time. Some naval historians still call it the single most damaging espionage operation in the history of the U.S. Navy. Jerry Whitworth alone is believed to have collected more than $332,000 for his part in it. For nearly 2 decades, colleagues, commanding officers, and fellow sailors worked alongside these men and suspected absolutely nothing. The operation spanned everything from the final years of Vietnam to the tensest years of the Cold War. An entire era of secrets sold in real time. By the early 1980s, Jerry Whitworth started to panic about what they had all done. In 1984, he anonymously mailed a series of letters to the FBI, signed only Russ, hinting at the entire operation. The letters were vague enough that investigators couldn't act on them in time. What finally ended it wasn't a codebreaker or a mole or a lucky raid. It was Walker's ex-wife. Bitter after their divorce, Barbara Walker called the FBI and told them everything she knew. In May 1985, the FBI began round-the-clock surveillance on John Walker. They followed him as he drove from Virginia into Maryland and watched him set a final dead drop for his Soviet handler. On May 20th, 1985, John Walker was arrested. 1985 became known in the press as the Year of the Spy. Several major espionage cases broke that same year, and American intelligence agencies were left asking how many more moles were still hiding in plain sight. One by one, the rest of the ring fell. His brother, his son, and finally, Jerry Whitworth. John Walker and his brother Arthur were both sentenced to life in prison. His son Michael received 25 years and was eventually paroled. Jerry Whitworth was sentenced to 365 years. An entire family, a father, a brother, a son, torn apart in public over a decision made almost 20 years earlier. Even Barbara Walker, the woman whose phone call ended it all, spent the rest of her life known as the ex-wife who turned in a Cold War spy ring. To this day, naval historians still study the Walker spy ring as the ultimate case study in insider betrayal. Not a mastermind, not a genius, just a man with access, a family willing to help him, and 18 years before anyone caught on. In the aftermath, the Navy rewrote huge parts of its own personnel security screening, specifically because of what Walker exposed. In interviews decades later, Walker never showed much remorse. He described it coldly as simply a business he happened to be good at. He spent the rest of his life behind bars and eventually died there, decades after his arrest. Even the Walker name itself never fully recovered. Decades later, it's still shorthand, in naval security circles, for the ultimate betrayal from within. No code breaking, no satellites, no brilliant tradecraft, just years of trust, quietly abused by the people closest to the secrets. If you want more Cold War operations the world almost never found out about, subscribe. There's a lot more still buried down there.